The beds were empty. 3 beds. 3 neatly arranged blankets shaped like sleeping men. The guards did not notice at first. The hallway lights were dim, and it was just another early morning on Alcatraz Island. The prison sat in the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by strong currents and freezing waves. No one escaped from Alcatraz. That's what everyone believed. But when the morning count began, a guard tapped one of the blanket shapes with his baton. It did not move. He tapped harder. The head rolled off the pillow and hit the floor. It was not a head. It was so painted, shaped, fake. The guard froze. He rushed to the next bed. Another fake head. The third bed, empty. That was a moment the truth hit like cold wind across the island. 3 inmates had vanished without a trace, and no one knew how. But to understand that night, we had to go back to when the 3 men first arrived on the rock. Their names were Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Frank was quiet and very smart. He had a high IQ and loved solving puzzles. The Anglin brothers were strong, calm, and always stuck together. They were not loud troublemakers. They watched. They learned. They waited. Life on Alcatraz was strict. Wake up early. Stand in line. Eat fast. Work hard. No talking in holes. No breaking rules. The prison was built to break escape dreams. Thick concrete walls. Steel bars. Guards and towers. And icy water in every direction. Many inmates tried to escape before. None made it. Or at least, none were ever found alive. At first, the days were slow and normal. Frank read books in the library. The Anglin brothers worked in the prison shop. Nothing unusual happened. That was the low point of the story. Quiet days. Cold nights. Routine. But routine is what gave them time. Frank noticed something. The air vent in his cell was small, but the concrete around it was old. Soft. Crumbly. He began to test it. Slowly. Carefully. Using a spoon from the dining hall. Night after night, after lights out, Frank would scrape. 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 The sound was soft. To cover the noise, the Anglin brothers played music during recreation time and later hummed softly at night. The scraping became a rhythm. Small bits of concrete fell away. They were not the only ones. Another inmate named Alan West joined them. 4 men. 4 cells. 4 holes growing behind vent covers. They hid the concrete dust inside their pants and dropped it in the yard during exercise. No one noticed. Guards did counts. They saw bodies in beds. Also, they thought. The high moment came when the holes were finally big enough. Behind the vents was a narrow utility corridor. Dark, unused, dusty. It led upward, toward the roof. But escaping the cells was only part of the plan. They still had to cross the bay. Cold water. Strong currents. Sharks rumored to swim below. Frank knew they needed something that would float. From raincoats stolen over months, they stitched together a raft. More than 50 raincoats. Sewn by hand. Carefully sealed with steam pipes to melt and bond the material. They worked in secret. On top of the cell block. Inside the unused corridor. In darkness. The Anglin brothers had grown up near water. They knew currents. They believed they could survive. Frank believed in planning. And the plan was nearly ready. They also made fake heads. Soap mixed with toothpaste. Paint stolen from the prison workshop. Real hair taken from the barbershop floor. At night, the fake heads rested on pillows. Blankets shaped into sleeping forms. From the hallway, it looked real. It had to, because guards checked every hour. Weeks passed, then months. The plan grew stronger. Alan West worked slower than the others. His hole was smaller. He struggled to break through the concrete. Time was running out. The extreme moment approached. June 11th, 1962. The night air was cold. Fog rolled across the bay. The perfect cover. After final count, lights dimmed. The prison went quiet. Frank whispered through the vent. Tonight. The Anglin brothers nodded in the dark. They placed the fake heads on pillows. Shaped the blankets. Waited for the guard's flashlight to pass. Then they squeezed through the vent holes. One by one. Frank first. Then John. Then Clarence. Alan West tried, but his hole was too small. He could not fit. He whispered in panic. Wait! But they could not. Time was ticking. Frank and the Anglin crawled through the narrow corridor, climbed pipes, reached the top of the cell house. The roof was cold and slippery. Below them, guards walked their routes. Unaware, they slid down a kitchen pipe, crossed the yard, moved toward the northeast shore of the island. Their raft was hidden there, carefully wrapped. Ready, Alan West remained behind, alone, listening to their footsteps fade. Back in the cell house, the fake heads lay still. A guard shined his flashlight inside Frank's cell. He saw what looked like a sleeping man. He moved on. Everything seemed normal. On the shoreline, the three men inflated the raft using a concertina-style tool made from a musical instrument. It filled slowly, quietly. The water below looked black, endless. Frank looked at the brothers. "This is it," he said softly. They pushed the raft into the water, climbed in, and began to paddle. That was the highest peak of the story. The moment 3 inmates vanished into the night. No alarms, no shouting, just fog and cold waves. Back inside the prison, Alan West finally broke through his vent. Too late. He crawled up, reached the roof, but the others were gone. He climbed back down, returned to his cell, and waited. Morning came. The guard tapped the first fake head. It rolled. Alarm bells rang. Sirens echoed across the island. Boats launched into the bay. Helicopters searched the water. The prison exploded into chaos. But there was no raft, no bodies, no sign, just cold water. And questions. Did they drown? Did they reach shore? Did they disappear into America forever? No one knew. The FBI searched for years. No proof was found. No bodies were recovered. No clear answers. 3 beds empty. 3 men gone. And the cold waters of Alcatraz keeping their secret. The search began before the sun was fully up. Boats cut through the cold water of San Francisco Bay. Coast Guard ships moved in wide circles. Helicopters hovered above the fog. Guards stood on the rocky edge of Alcatraz Island, staring out into the gray waves. They expected to see something. A piece of raft. A body. A sign. They saw nothing. Inside the prison, panic grew. The warden, Olin Blackwell, stood in the control room with a tight jaw. "No one escapes Alcatraz," he said firmly. But even he knew this was different. 3 men were gone. Not one. Not a rumor. Not a failed attempt. Gone. Alan West was pulled from his cell. He sat at a metal table across from investigators. His hands trembled. "They left without me," he said. "I couldn't get out in time." "Where did they go?" an officer asked. West shook his head. "Out to the water. That was the plan." The FBI joined the case quickly. Agents in dark suits walked through the cell house. They studied the vent holes. They picked up the fake heads. They looked at the spoon used to scrape the concrete. They were impressed and worried. The low point of the story came during the first week. The tide charts were studied. Experts said the water was too cold, too strong. They believed the men drowned within minutes. "It's impossible," one official told reporters. The currents would have carried them out to sea. Families were told not to hope, but something did not fit. Pieces of raincoat material were found floating near Angel Island. A small scrap, rubber-like. It matched the type used to make the raft. If they drowned right away, how did that piece drift so far? The high moment of hope came when a man on a nearby boat reported something strange. He said he saw a small dark object in the water the night of the escape. He thought it was driftwood. But now he wasn't sure. Could it have been the raft? Back on Alcatraz, changes were made fast. Cell searches became stricter. Vent covers were replaced with stronger metal. Night counts were doubled. Guards were trained to check closer. The prison felt tighter, colder, more watchful. Frank Morris became the center of attention. His record showed he was brilliant. He escaped from other prisons before, but never like this. Never from an island. The Anglin brothers had grown up swimming in cold rivers in Georgia. Their family told reporters they could swim like fish. That statement changed everything. Maybe the water wasn't the end. Maybe it was a beginning. Weeks passed. No bodies were found. No clothes washed ashore. No clear sign of death. That silence created something powerful. Doubt. The FBI followed every lead. They checked bus stations, train routes, family mail. They even watched the Anglin family home for years. But nothing solid appeared. The low moment returned when months passed with no breakthrough. The official theory remained the same. They drowned. The case file grew thicker, but the answers stayed thin. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived years later. It claimed to be from one of the escapees. It said the writer had survived. It asked for medical help in exchange for surrender. Experts studied the handwriting. Some said it matched. Some said it didn't. The letter could not be proven true, but it kept the mystery alive. Alcatraz itself closed in 1963, less than a year after the escape. Too expensive to maintain. Too damaged by salt water. The prison that claimed no one could escape had just faced its greatest challenge. The extreme moment that ends chapter came many years later. A photograph surfaced, taken in Brazil. It showed two men standing near a termite mound. The photo was sent to the Anglin family. Facial experts examined it. The men looked older, but familiar, very familiar. Could they have survived? Could they have made it across the bay that cold night? The FBI reopened the case, and the question returned stronger than ever. If they didn't drown, where did they go? The photograph changed everything. Two men stood in the sunlight of a farm in Brazil. They were older, thinner, wearing simple clothes, but their faces looked like John and Clarence Anglin. The FBI studied the image for months. Facial experts measured ears, jawlines, noses. They compared the photo to old prison pictures. Some experts said there was a strong match. Others said it was not clear enough. The truth stayed just out of reach. Meanwhile, the legend grew. Tourists walked through Alcatraz years later. They stood inside the tiny cells. They stared at the vent holes. They touched the cold walls. And they asked the same question. How did they do it? Guides would point to the fake heads, the raincoat raft, the narrow pipe they slid down. People shook their heads in disbelief. It sounded like a movie, but it was real. The low moment came for the investigators. Years passed. Decades passed. The case remained open, but there were no arrests, no confessions, no bodies. Families grew older. Agents retired. The file was moved from one desk to another, still unsolved. Frank Morris had no close family pushing for answers. His trail was quiet, but the Anglin family never stopped believing. Every Christmas, they left space at the table. Every year, they hoped. They claimed to receive secret cards signed John and Clarence. No one could prove it, but hope does not need proof. The FBI followed leads into the 1970s, then the 1980s, then beyond. They checked records in South America. They searched death certificates. They listened to tips from strangers. One man said he helped 3 men land a boat in Marin County the night of the escape. Another said he saw a car stolen near the Golden Gate Bridge that same night. None of it could be fully proven. The high moment of suspense returned when new technology was used. Modern computer analysis studied the Brazil photograph again. It suggested the men could still be alive at the time it was taken. But that photo was old too. Time kept moving. Some experts believe the men drowned quickly. The water was around 50 degrees at night. The currents were strong. Even trained swimmers could struggle. But others pointed to something important. The tide that night may have carried them towards shore, not out to sea. If they entered the water at the right time, the current could have helped them. Frank was smart. He studied tides in the prison library. He would not guess. He would plan. Back on Alcatraz, the empty cells remained. Visitors would stand in front of Frank's old cell. They would look at the vent hole, widened by a spoon. It looked small, impossible, but it had been enough. The extreme truth of the story is this. No bodies were ever found. No clear proof of death. No clear proof of survival. 3 men vanished, without a trace. The FBI officially closed active investigation in 1979, but the U.S. Marshal Service continued to follow leads. To this day, the case remains open, because technically, the men are still wanted. If they survived, they would be very old now. If they drowned, the bay kept it secret. On quiet nights in San Francisco, when fog rolls across the water and the old prison sits dark against the sky, people still wonder. Did a homemade raft carry 3 men to freedom? Did they step onto the shore, wet and shaking, and disappear into America? Or did the cold water swallow them whole? The escape from Alcatraz became one of the greatest prison mysteries in American history. Not because it was violent, not because it was loud, but because it worked. At least, it seemed to. 3 beds were empty. 3 fake heads fooled the guards. 3 inmates vanished into the fog. And more than 60 years later, the question still stands. Did they drown, or did they win? That is where the story ends. With 3 men, a cold bay, and a mystery that refuses to sink.